The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Fast and I, good afternoon. Welcome to Mannin Line on Manx Radio. We're open line through till 1, so call, text, email and WhatsApp. Lots of stuff happening. Of course, tomorrow the chair of the Housing and Communities Board, David Ashford, MHK, is on. But the objective assessment of housing need has been published, finally. And housing is a central part of where we're going to move forward because by common consent, it's a big issue. It's a big issue for young people, for older people, the issue of downsizing later on in life and finding smaller houses for couples who are getting on in years and just wanting to get out of a big house, causing a problem. The amount of housing that's available for young people causes issues. So have you got any thoughts on that before? Obviously, tomorrow we'll be able to get more into that with David Ashford. I know he's got lots of opinions, and I don't doubt that you have as well. Does anybody know, says John, are there any public e-bike charging points on the Isle of Man? They have them everywhere for cars, but I can't seem to find any for e-bikes. Are there any? Do you know of them? Can you tell me where they are? Can you pass the word on? Anybody know, are there any public e-bike charging points on the Isle of Man? Says John. And also, fingers crossed, lots of love coming in this morning for the Germans at Doonglen. I hope they weren't blown asunder last night. And there'll be a lot of resetting of tents and tent pegs over the next few hours. So fingers crossed that we've seen the worst of the weather. I do hope the hospitality marquee has survived. Can you imagine if it wasn't there for the politicians, says Fran. I'm guessing you've got an invite, Fran. I'm sure you're just the sort of person the politicians would invite. The Eastern Civic Amenity site is reopened if you're looking for somewhere. We used to call it the Tip. Anyway, it's open, as is the Southern Recycling Centre, so they're both open. Obviously, the weather was affecting them. And we're trying to find out also whether or not the British Legion is going to be allowed. There's a British Legion post, remember, at the back of the grandstand. We don't know, some doubt at the moment, whether or not the British Legion is going to be at the back of the grandstand. Thanks also to everybody who commented yesterday about, we were talking to Jill Christian and Lee Dixon from FC Isle of Man about where they go forward, and I think they were extraordinarily honest and frank about what their aims are, and the fact that at the moment that project is losing money. And lots of people have put lots of effort into it. Some people have put money into it as well. But if you've got any thoughts on where you think that can go, then by all means. Geordie John dropped a note into me who said, I heard last year about areas that are looking tired on the Isle of Man, and you've mentioned it, yes, the weeds that are here, there and everywhere. I'm from Newcastle. I'm a handyman. I've got friends on the Isle of Man to stay, but if I could put in a few hours every day for a few weeks and get an evening meal back, I'd cover my own costs. And have some beer money left over. The items raised on the radio that need a quick fix for a big impact will be a pleasure to do. It's such a showcase event for the Isle of Man that if I can be part of it, spend some time with my friends and give something back. Bit late for this year, but the offer is open. We could do something awesome, says Geordie John. It's also been mentioned in the past, there's a kind of a movement called guerrilla gardening, where the public takes things into their own hands and does things up. If the agencies of the state can't be bothered, don't want to, or don't think it's a good idea. Do you think that might happen here? Do you think we could get some guerrilla gardeners to go to a roundabout or a flower bed that's been neglected and do it? Can you imagine what would happen? Would there be health and safety repercussions? I see. What's the weather like over the next few weeks, says Texter 505. Well, I've got a very special method for figuring this out. It comes from long years of research. You stick your right index finger in your mouth and you lick it, and then you stick it in the air. That's my theory anyway. I just wonder what you think. Housing on the Isle of Man. Attempts to ensure that reports are published the moment they're received by Comin have been knocked back in this week's sitting of Tynwald. Motions calling for the immediate publication of 3 separate reports failed to carry, so they weren't debated. Those were the Development Viability Study, Premier Advisory Group Report on School Funding, and this OAHN, the Objective Assessment of Housing Need. The OAHN has been published shortly beforehand anyway. Now, after the sitting, we talked to people about, what it is that they like. And the OAHN, the Housing and Communities Board, had the report a couple of months ago, but it's only just been published. David Ashford, MHK, is the chair of the board. Now, he's on Mannin Line tomorrow, but prior to that, he's just been telling us why he's frustrated, really, about what's been happening.
Well, the delay was, first of all, it had to go through the formal processes. So it needed to be seen by the Housing and Communities Board, which saw it, I think it was a couple of months ago. It then had to go to Council of Ministers for them to have a look at it and approve how they wanted to move forward with it, which it did a couple of weeks ago. And then Council of Ministers have agreed to have it laid onto the order paper for the next sitting of Tynwald in order that we can actually have a debate around the OHAN, and that notes the Council of Ministers will come back with policy proposals in October.
Is it quite frustrating when you have a report sitting here ready to go in your eyes and you're sitting having to wait for it to go through all the rigmarole of the Manx political system?
Well, any process can be frustrating, particularly when you want to move things on, and particularly, as I've said many times, housing has to be the number one priority, because housing links to everything else. If government doesn't achieve in the area of housing, then it won't achieve the Island Plan and it won't achieve the economic plan. They're all interlinked. But there are processes there for a very good reason. Council of Ministers needed to give it due consideration. They've done that now. It's public. We'll be having a discussion in the June Tynwald. And then, like I say, further policy proposals will be coming forward to the fresh parliamentary year and the October sitting.
Having these statistics is all well and good, but is this going to be just another report that the government's paid for, which doesn't actually see any action from it? Are you optimistic that anything is actually going to happen about this and happen soon?
Well, being quite frank, it has to happen. The OHAN can't be another report that sits on the shelf, because basically, like I say, all of government's strategy around the Island Plan, all of government's economic strategy is reliant on both growing the population and increasing the economically active population. And you will not do that unless the housing mix is right. So the OHAN isn't something that can just say, right, we've got the report, job done. It needs to be cracked on with, and it needs to be starting now.
It's going to be interesting tomorrow, though, when David Ashford is in. Those are his words. He said it quite a few times there. Housing is central to everything. The Island Plan simply won't work unless we get housing right. So it'll be interesting to see what his views are of how we can move forward quickly, perhaps immediately, and do something about the housing situation on the Isle of Man. David Ashford is on. And if you've got an answer to it, by all means, get in touch, tell us. We could save some money, couldn't we? I see a gang of Douglas Corporation working at spraying weeds in the lane opposite the Woody that backs onto Woodburn Square. I thought they'd given up, says Mike. And also, do you remember Adam, the festoon lighting man? I do. Adam used to be on a couple of years ago, wasn't it? Was on all the time. Very much an advocate of the old festoon light. Do you remember when Douglas Promenade used to look pretty? Used to look like a resort? Adam, the festoon lighting man, he used to do guerrilla gardening here. He's moved across, I think, to university. Yes, he was doing I think it was urban design, Adam. Chatted to Adam during the last election campaign. He came to one of our broadcasts at, I think it was Jack's he came to. And Adam, also very much a sea swimmer as well. Great cameraman, photographer. Sent me some lovely underground shots swimming around the Tower of Refuge. But yeah, guerrilla gardening, I wonder whether that will ever catch on. Thanks also. Ronnie dropped me a note in regarding the railways and said, yet again, I'm going to have to be apologising to my guests who are coming over for a portion of TT about the horse trams. What do I tell them? What do I do? Do I tell them we don't like the horse trams, we can't be bothered, we can't afford it? What do I say to my guests when they say the halfway horse tram is all very well, but it's merely halfway? Ronnie, I don't know what to tell you, I'll be honest with you. They say we're going to get the horse trams back from the War Memorial from Castlemona Avenue to the sea terminal. At the moment we have that wilding bed, but really nothing else. Neil's on now. Hi, Neil.
Good afternoon, Andy. I'm getting very annoyed with government. We seem to have this continual spin and message sent out that for some reason we have to completely cover our island in concrete and build more and more houses. That's the message they're peddling to us. In actual fact, in my view, the cost of housing is extortionate, and that's both for purchase and for rent. On the one hand, they want to encourage people of working age to continue living on the island, whilst at the same time, the costs, and particularly the rental costs, are forcing young people to leave the island. They are then being replaced by people from the UK and further afield. In fact, actually, without being too dramatic, it's a form of ethnic cleansing in one form. But also another aspect of this is that some of the finest fertile soils we have on the island, and I'm driving through to Douglas this morning. I'm looking at that huge sprawl, huge estate, which is at Ballahick Farm. Ballahick Farm was one of the most fertile farms in the Isle of Man. I remember Jack Farragher farming it 40 years ago now, and it produced wonderful vegetables, grain, and of course there was always cattle and sheep on that land. And now it's completely covered in concrete. On the one hand, governments say we want to have food sustainability. How on earth are we going to have food sustainability when our best soils are being covered in concrete and housing, purely to accommodate the buy-to-let market? Because the majority of those houses are rented out, and young people just simply cannot afford the rent and leave.
As you say, we lose a lot of people who, bluntly, a lot of young people whose education has been paid for by our taxes. So we've invested in child benefit and things like that. We've invested in education. And yet, as you say, there are many young people who simply leave the Isle of Man, take one look at the UK and think, well, I can get a better life in the UK. And how do you solve that, Neil?
Well, the only way to solve it is that when people come here with extortionate amounts of money and want to buy up large tracts of property, they have to pay a speculation tax. And coupled with that, if they buy up considerable amounts of property, then we have a tax take on the rental income of 80%. That would kill it in one go. That would effectively deflate the buy-to-let market, and houses would be released for some of our own young people to afford them. And I quite agree with you, Andy. The education system is exceptionally good on the island. We have a good basic and further educational programs over here. I've worked with apprentices that go to Isle of Man College and Isle of Man University College. They take HNDs, they take their degree, but then within 2 years, they look at the property situation, the extortionate cost of rent, and they're gone. And then the government pays huge grants for other people to come in and replace them, and then give them a 2-year freedom of paying any form of national insurance contributions. It's absolutely crazy.
What's to be done? I mean, if the government's stated aim is to get 15,000 more people, to get to 100,000, if their stated aim is to do that, and where do we put the houses? Do we resort to tower blocks in built-up areas? What do we do?
There are thousands of houses on the Isle of Man which can be renovated. Look at the wonderful Victorian houses we have lying empty, thousands and thousands of them. One of your regular callers, Stephen, he's done a great deal of research into this, and there's a huge amount of property which is vacant on the island. But of course, you buy nothing decent over here for less than about 550, 600,000, and young local people simply cannot afford it or would not be willing to take on that huge mortgage debt, which they would have extreme difficulties in financing.
And we seem to be.
I'm afraid.
Go on, sorry.
I say the answer, in my view, is a speculation tax and a huge tax take on people who buy a considerable number of homes and rent them all out. That would deflate the market and bring prices down.
What do you think the government can say to the young people who are, well, there's frustration building up, resentment even building up when young people, sit and do that kitchen table sums on a pad and figure out how much they can afford, what sort of mortgage they can service, and it comes at the end with a red number. They simply can't afford it. So
I quite agree.
I mean, what can government say to young people like that?
Well, I think government has actually abandoned young local people. They're a whole generation which are being completely abandoned by our government, not just this administration, but the previous two. They've effectively forcing young Manx people to leave the island because, they want a home, they want a life, they want a future, and a considerable number of them would like to do that here, but they simply cannot afford to do it. And I've said this before, government has the power to legislate. That's why we elect them to actually put in legislation. And the legislation we need is to sort out this housing crisis. But they are reluctant, totally reluctant to put in any form of financial restraints on development companies and this appalling buy-to-let market, and it's keeping house prices extortionately high. It's crazy situation. And to pay people then to take their jobs and give them huge grants to come here adds insult to injury. In fact, I've worked with many young people, and they feel abandoned. They're suffering from depression, anxiety, and they just need to get away. And it's not just people on lower incomes. I was actually in one of the leading banks. I won't give the young lady's name away. I was in one of the leading banks here a few weeks ago. I actually went into the private client side, and there was a young girl there who used to be on the counter. And I said, you're progressing, you're doing very well. She said, yes. She said, I like over here. She said, I'm taking my examinations, she says, and then she said, after that, she says, my boyfriend and I, we've decided to leave. And I said, why are you leaving? She said, well, we're paying, she says, £1,200 a month rent now, she said, for a very small cottage. She said, and with the cost of living, she said, and et cetera, she said, it makes more sense to me to finish my qualifications with the bank I'm in, she said, and then get a job at one of their branches, she says, in the UK. So we're losing talented young Manx people, and it's a crazy situation. And I'm disgusted with our government because they've completely abandoned this generation. I just think it's disgraceful, to be frank.
It'll be interesting to see. We'll certainly put all those points to David Ashford tomorrow, and just to see, because at the moment it seems like we're in a cul-de-sac.
They'll come back with the same waffle. We get the same waffle time and time again. It's all this spin about we need to build more houses. When they build more houses, wealthy people will simply buy them up and rent them out. Nothing will be achieved. Absolutely nothing. We need drastic action, proper legislation, speculation taxes, tax on second homes. That's the only way they will sort it out and take the heat out of this market and make local houses available for local people. And at the same time, we're losing vast tracts of our countryside, some of the best land we've got. It just doesn't add up. Doesn't add up at all.
OK, I appreciate that. Neil, thanks for calling today.
Thanks very much for your time, Andy. Bye-bye now.
Good to hear from you. 12:25. So, again, you heard what Neil had to say. Is it time for a speculation tax? Is it time for a tax on buy-to-let? Should there be a restriction on how many properties anyone can own? And certainly if people are buying to let and using them, what do you do? At the moment, it's a perfectly legitimate legal form of earning money to purchase a house and then to rent it out. Obviously, nowadays you have to be registered as a landlord. There's lots of barriers that go in your way, but there we are. But if it is the government's stated aim, and it is, to get 15,000 more people here, where are they going to live? Quite simply, where are they going to live? If you're going to live in a civilised manner, not cram 8 to a room, where are people going to live? Admittedly, there are some big estates being built. Peel seems to just be growing like a fungus. The big estate in Ballasalla is set to get even bigger. So what do we do on this? Gordon has an opinion now. Hi, Gordon.
Yeah, hi. I just heard your previous caller, and I totally agree what he says. And I would like to know that why, how many MHKs have houses to rent? Because are they against the principles of what this previous caller was talking about? I really would like to know.
Do you agree that we should? Do you agree with the 100,000 population target? Do you think we need 15,000 more people here?
No, I think we do need people here working, and I also I heard that the government, or read on your website, that they were going to support the catering people over the TT period.
Yeah.
Now, normally, catering, pubs, I'm in Port St Mary, and the pub's gone because people didn't go to them. There's one now, which is the Albert, and presumably he's running his business as appropriate without government support, I hope. And why shouldn't, if a business can't pay more than the living wage, why should they survive?
Okay, all right, Gordon, thanks for calling today. We appreciate it.
Question, and let's hear an answer. I look forward to hearing from them.
All right,
okay, thank you.
I appreciate
Bye-bye.
that. Good to hear from you. Thanks for that. Here's a note in from David, who said, regarding housing in the Isle of Man, where Mr Cannon was out campaigning at the last election, I asked Mr Cannon, why doesn't the government stop companies and individuals buying up new build housing to rent out? And the government build houses for rent to buy schemes where the tenants pay rent for 5 years as a deposit for a possible purchase through a government first-time buyer's mortgage. We might look at that, he said, but nothing has happened. What a surprise, says David. Well, I mean, government used to give help to people. Lots of people are sitting in houses listening to this programme now that were bought with government help 20, 30, 40 odd years ago. It doesn't seem that young people today can see the way out with this. It isn't blindingly obvious how young people are going to make their way in the world. Howard's on now. Hi, Howard.
Hello, Andy. It's nice to hear a new voice of Neil on there, and in lots of cases of what he was saying is very, very true. For quite a number of years, I've been going on about this for a while. People say, oh God, not him again. But because the interest rates in the banks had dropped to virtually nothing, people with considerable amount of money were buying up properties relatively cheap and renting them out. And at that rate, they were getting an interest rate coming back on the rent, which is virtually paying the mortgage on this house for them, or they were buying them, and the interest rates were far in excess of what you would have got in the bank for the same amount of money outlay. And this is what's been going on here for years. And our own government is complicit in this because they are paying, in a lot of cases, and I know people that were living up Governor's Hill, in rented property paid for by the DHS, the benefit system. And there were quite a lot of people up there. The houses were paid as they were basically social housing. And people, if they're going to build these houses and rent them out, they're going to carry on doing this because they have a regular income. We know, and we've heard several times, and you've said it yourself, that one particular individual, company or otherwise, has about 300 properties. Now, that's not a business. What is? And they should be charged business rates on these and not allowed to invest their money in our property and our lives and future. They're the Rackmans of the modern day. And in lots of cases, As I say, they're actually paid for by the DHSS. And that there is, I've just said it, a guaranteed income.
So if government knows this is happening, Howard, why do you think they're doing nothing about it?
Because they're complicit in it. They're all working hand in glove. The building companies, and we do only have a couple of three large companies here on the island who are building houses by the hundred. And then there's other people coming over, and they have money where they've made money in the UK. And as I said to you before there, that the interest rates in the banks were abysmal. And they've bought properties up, and their money is coming back to them continually. And the Isle of Man has seen that, and that's why there's been a dramatic price increase in housing. And people say they just can't afford to live here. How very true. It's an open door, revolving door, that no matter how many houses you build, there'll always be somebody there wanting to rent them or sell them out, rent them out. But this is something that the government is going to have to stand up and be counted. And I think David Ashford, he's one, he's a decent man, but he's working with his hands tied behind his back. Where the government as it stands now, they're all in the same nest, and you'll see very few changes within the hierarchy in government, because I'm not saying they're lying in their own pockets, but there must be some means of sorting this out, because the young people of today just cannot afford to move on to the bottom of the ladder.
Okay. All right. Appreciate that, Howard. Thanks for being with us.
Ben. Take care.
Good to hear from you. 117 says, Andy, you're talking nonsense. If kids work hard, they can buy a first-time buyer's house. My son's an apprentice, earns about $28,000. He bought a first-time buyer house in Ramsey last year. He's worked his backside off to buy that house. He and his partner are about to have their first child. If kids work hard, they can buy it. He's done it alone, not with his partner. But he didn't drink out, didn't eat out, didn't waste money. If you want to, you can go for it, says 117. Roger says the landlord's bill had a lot of landlords sell up, so this has raised the rental prices as demand outweighs availability. I also think the banks aren't helping, as you can't buy a property to do up and live in. They have a retention put on the mortgage, so they have to buy a new build only, says Roger. That's that situation. David's on now. Hi, David.
Hi, Danny. Just a two-star to the government is, now that the vaping bill has been approved by the King and it's going to be implemented, I think it's next week. So I wouldn't mind a little program next week to say to the people out there, and to follow up from government is, how do we educate people who are under 18, I think the legislation says it is, they can't buy the vaping products, and people have got to hide them like they do for cigarettes, and how we're going to educate them not to vape.
I wonder, how are we going to do it? Because it seems like there's a generation of young people absolutely entranced with vaping.
Well, you would think the health minister, never mind the education minister, would be combining for education into schools to say, this is bad for you. Look what happens in the future. I always remember, and I've never smoked, and thank God I've never smoked, but when I used to watch it on the telly, the adverts where they used to squeeze the lung of somebody and all the tar came out of it, it hit home. And I think we've got to do that to the younger generation coming along and saying, this is not good for you. You look at the amount of people that are healthy, playing football, rugby, netball, basketball, a lot of sport there. But you still see schools, especially, I know for a fact in Bemaheg and also in St. Ninians there, you can see the cloud of perfume coming up when they come out of school for their lunch and so forth. You can smell it in different places. We need to educate them. This is not good for you. Now, I want to quickly go, in case I missed David Ashford. I believe Mr. Ashford is the head of the housing unit there, so therefore he's a landlord. Indirectly, he's responsible for all the local government housing and so forth in central government. So why don't they comply with the law? The law complies to people who are private landlords, But why doesn't it happen to government or even local authorities?
Okay, we'll put that to him tomorrow.
Yeah, because there is no difference. Or there shouldn't be any differences. Is if you're in a private accommodation, or if you're in a local authority accommodation, or the local government. And why shouldn't the local government unit pass them houses down to each of the local authority areas which are close by them, the likes of Laxey, down south? There's quite a lot of. There must be about 2,500 plus homes that Dalkey operate, and I don't know whether accountability of how much they spend on them. Who checks them? Is there a capping limit like there is in other places? And the other final thing I want to slip into is, don't forget, and that, a fella's been on about his son. When we buy a house, when we want some care, when we get older, what do they say to you? Sell your property, get rid of it, buy something else, downsize. And that's another difference, which is wrong.
All right, thanks for calling.
Bye.
All right, good to hear from you. As David mentioned, the Vaping Products Act 2024 comes into force Monday, 27th, next Monday. The Vaping Bill 2023 has been given royal assent. From Monday, the 27th, the Vaping Products Act will come into operation, which means the sale and supply of these products to under-18s will be prohibited. New advertising restrictions and display regulations will be introduced on Ireland from September. That means that retail outlet shops, which are accessible to those under 18, vaping products will no longer be permitted to be on display, a bit like cigarettes, as David mentioned. So it's an important move. Kate Law-Brennan, Cabinet Office Minister, says this is an important move for the current and future health of young people. So what does it mean? This is for under 18s. A person under 18 cannot be sold or supplied a vaping product, so can't buy and can't be bought on behalf of. It's an offence for a person over the age of 18 who has some level of responsibility, ownership, control or management for a business selling vaping products to sell or supply vaping products to anybody unless they have permission to do so from a responsible person. It's an offence to coerce or assist any person under 18 to obtain, sell or supply vaping products. Committing any of these offences may on summary conviction result in a fine of up to £5,000 for the person supplying the vaping product. For those aged between 16 and 18, it will be an offence to import a vaping product, something which can result in a fine of up to £500. We watch, we wait, and we'll see. And Julian. Hi, Julian.
Hi, Andy. How you doing?
Very well today, yes. I stayed away from the hurricane last night.
Yeah, I was looking at pictures of the paddock with all the tents being recreated. Must have been a hell of a night up there. Housing. My understanding so far is that we're trying to encourage 15,000 to come to the island, of which 5,000 will be economically active and 10,000 will be dependent. Have I got that right?
Something like that. It seems to change.
So if you've got 5,000 people coming in and you've got 10,000 dependents, won't the 10,000 dependents absorb some, if not all, of the tax take from the 5,000?
Well, presumably they will, but presumably also I think they're banking on the indirect taxes, the VAT that's going to be spent and other taxes that will be spent, things like fuel duty and what have you.
And at the roadshow, there was a couple of questions about the criteria for who is coming to the island. You know, the tax take from somebody who's, say, working in hospitality is probably likely to be a lot less than somebody, say, coming to, say, be a consultant at the hospital or something. So at what point do you get a negative tax take, if you see what I mean? But when we're talking about new houses being built, I hear that asylum seekers that come to the island, the landlords are being paid £422 per head per month.
Is this, is this skeet, or when you say asylum seekers, what do you mean?
people that have been, say, for example, we've had some Ukrainian people that have come to the island since the Ukrainian war.
Yeah.
It is skeet, but I hear there's a property in Ramsey where they've got 11 people in that situation, which effectively means that the taxpayer is paying that landlord £4,642 a month.
I wasn't aware of that. I mean, do you know this for an absolute fact?
This is what I'm hearing.
Oh,
now,
okay.
Skeet, so this is just what I'm hearing, but it came from a source that seemed to know what they were talking about. I'd just be interested to know if anyone else knows if there is a £422 per person per month payment scheme from the government to people renting accommodation for people that are coming over here on an asylum seeker basis.
Well, maybe I could ask David Ashford that tomorrow, see if he happens to know.
That's a great idea, yeah, because that would be quite an incentive for people to buy up properties as a buy-to-let, wouldn't it?
It would be, but then again, let me speak up for people who operate buy-to-lets, and I hasten to add I don't, but it's not illegal at the moment. At the moment, the legislative framework allows it, and that's the way capitalism works. If there's an opportunity, then that opportunity will be taken, and people have taken it.
That's right. But when I'm away, I have noticed, for example, in Dublin, some of the Holiday Inn chains, especially after or during COVID, they were reconfigured to be sort of a stopping place for asylum seekers. And the guy that owns that chain that built them, he's basically paid by the government, per head for however many will fit in the room. So it kind of sounds a little bit like that. Just that's something that would be interesting to hear if that is true or not.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that, Julian. Good to hear from you.
Thanks, Andy. Cheers.
17 minutes before 1.
Hello there, this is Dr. Alex Allinson, Treasury Minister, and I'd really like to wish Manx Radio a very happy 60th birthday. Well done.
ShopRite is your one-stop shop for all things homestay, with savers across the store to keep your visitors fueled during their stay. Whether you offer a full Manx fry-up or let your guests help themselves, ShopRite has all the ingredients you need to create the best breakfast, as well as snacks and drinks, barbecue food, ready meals, bulk buy household, cleaning and laundry. There's even a range of homeware in larger stores. Get set for homestay at ShopRite, Onken, Peel and Ramsey.
Customer satisfaction and quality have been a priority at Milcreasts for over 60 years. We're proud to represent the great car manufacturers, Jaguar, Land Rover, Vauxhall, Mitsubishi, Subaru and Isuzu, and have taken time to build up the trust and respect of both car makers and drivers. 100% independent and Manx owned for new and approved used cars, leasing, servicing, parts and superb customer service. Milcreasts. It's what's behind us that keeps us in front.
When it comes to building and DIY supplies, shop where the professionals shop. Haldane Fisher for concrete blocks to roof trusses, timber to tiles, doors to panel pins, boilers to bathrooms, drainage to guttering, and everything in between. Get the job done with the right products from Haldane Fisher. Visit our stores in Douglas and Ramsey, or find us online on Facebook. Proud to be on Island.
Feel right at home with Haldane Fisher.
EVF, fueling the island and fueling you. With a great range of fresh foods and everyday essentials at our filling stations. And always great offers too. Ellen Mannin Fuels.
Roses are blooming at Ramsey Garden Centre, and with a variety of hanging baskets, summer bedding, fruit and ornamental trees, plus a full range of garden essentials, there's never been a better time to visit Ramsey Garden Centre. Open 7 days a week.
Get ready for your chance to win this bank holiday weekend here on Manx Radio. We've teamed up with Waltons to give you the chance to win a £300 voucher to spend in store. From first thing Saturday, just go to the Manx Radio Facebook page and identify the famous TV show. Then listen out for the window of opportunity across the bank holiday weekend and text your name and answer to 166 177. And also check out Walton's huge offers in store this Friday, Saturday and Bank Holiday Monday. Find them on Facebook or waltons.im. Make this your winning weekend with Waltons and your nation station, Manx Radio.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
14 minutes before 1, and John's with us now. Hi, John.
Hi, Andy. I was listening to Fergal Sharkey's comments about the disgraceful situation here in the west of the island and the bathing water standards with the sewerage.
And he also talked about Laxey as well.
Yes, Laxey as well. Well, you could probably spend 10 minutes talking about Laxey, but just looking at Peel, the situation obviously is disgraceful. The Manx utility, of course, did in fact buy Glenfaber House. I think they paid £600,000 for it in order to put the sewage treatment works there. Anyways, that got knocked back. They demolished the house without planning permission, so they've lost probably 18 months, 2 years. By following that route, they've now had to go back to put the treatment plant where it should have gone in the first place. Now, the thing about the sewerage it's impacting on the bathing water standards, it's not the only effluent that's getting into the river and into the marina and causing problems.
Yeah.
You've got up to St John's, and you've got the St John's Sewage Treatment Works, which isn't the best. And some of the effluent that's coming out of there on occasions can be fairly poor. You come a little bit further down, and about 6 or 8 weeks ago, we've actually reported a farmer who's been allowing slurry to run into a tributary of the River Neb, and the slurry, from once it gets into this little stream, within an hour is in the marina.
So who do you report them to?
Oh, DEFA.
Right. Okay. And what's that process? What did DEFA say when you phone up and say this is happening?
Oh, they're very good to get stuck in, go out and investigate. We're waiting to see whether this particular farmer is going to get prosecuted. He should be. It's happened before on a number of occasions. Actually, the farmer, people will know who it is because he's already been fined £7,000. And this is a farmer who, under the Countryside Care Scheme, in the last 10 years has probably received somewhere in the region of £300,000 for environmental improvements. Now, when you get away from the farm and come down a little bit further, we've got the Ragget. And, of course, the problem with the Ragget, as we know, is the PCBs. It's in the leachate. It shouldn't be going into the marine environment at all. It's completely banned everywhere. That's still going on. It gets tankered from the Ragget down and discharged into the sewers at Peel. And you come down a little bit further, and of course, then we have the food park, the shellfish processing.
Yeah.
And some of the housekeeping standards there have been very poor. About a third of the weight of the shellfish that's landed is putrescible, the waste, the frills and stomachs, whatever. Now, in the past, that's been dumped over the back of Peel Hill. That's unacceptable because that sort of waste is what's known as a Category 3 product.
Is that toxic, or is it just awful?
It's just awful. It's quite often left 2 or 3 days before it gets dumped. It obviously festers, nasties, all sorts of nasties in it. And the other one is the Category 3 animal byproduct, is the creamery waste into Douglas Bay. Again, that wouldn't be allowed in the UK.
Well, I think the whole issue with this, John, is that the Isle of Man has no legal requirement to adhere to what's it called, the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive. They just adopt it as best practice. There's no legal requirement.
No, well, we're not part of Europe. So the government have actually, I believed, in the past used as an excuse not to do anything. It's only 2 years ago that they adopted the bathing water standards, which have been in place in Europe since 2006. They weren't going to introduce bathing water standards because there was no treatment. Raw sewage was going into the sea everywhere around the island. Well, now that's nearly all gone. There's only Peel and Laxey.
So, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think Manx Utilities should do, or what do you think the government should do?
Well, somebody needs to talk to the MUA and say to them, get your act together and get sorted. There are contractors on the island who could do the work. There might be difficulties in obtaining the equipment, but it's been on the go for several years now, and why they didn't have a policy in place to procure the equipment that's needed, I don't know. But the stuff that's coming out of the food park, particularly into the storm drainage or into the sewerage system, is pretty rotten. It's an awful lot of very dirty water. Most of it, for a while now, has been going into the marina, and of course, meliciferous odours, I think, is a way to describe it. There's all sorts of nasties in rotting shellfish waste. Excuse me.
Well, thank you. We wait and see. I mean, something that you mentioned is the dairy products pipe. We can see when the whey pipes open from here on Douglas Head, because we see lots and lots of seagulls, presumably after the fish that are after the whey.
Yeah, well, this is again it's a problem. Seagulls in Douglas and seagulls in Peel, they scavenge, eat all sorts of putrescible material, and then promptly fly into Peel with their nesting at the moment and defecate everywhere. Or if you're down at the food park, on some occasions, maybe 200 seagulls stood on the roof of the food park units. Again, Peel's desperate for seagulls droppings. It's horrendous. And of course, a fact which perhaps hasn't been picked up on, you quite often, particularly when the gulls have fledged, you'll often get large numbers of them stood on Peel Beach of a night, roosting. And of course, when they're standing around or sitting around, they're defecating. So the sand becomes contaminated with seagull droppings. There's all sorts of little facets about it all, which probably haven't been looked at and really need to be addressed.
Okay. John, thanks for that. Thanks. It's a distasteful subject, but we have to talk about it. Thanks for calling.
No problem. Bye.
Good to hear from you. 7 minutes before 1. Manx Utilities, as I say, they're not under any legal requirement to adhere to this Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive and adopt the standards as best practice during the design of infrastructure, which has been applied across the Isle of Man. They actually agree with Fergal Sharkey about the discharge of raw sewage in Peel and Garth unacceptable. Crikey. And prioritising completion of Phase 2 of the Regional Sewage Treatment Strategy, which will see the new works constructed in these catchments. We just want to know when. Ken's with us now. Hi, Ken.
Afternoon. I wonder if the new law about vaping will stop the older children vaping on school premises, which go on at the moment, because sometimes occasionally I go to the QE2 and you could strawberry, is that raspberry, you go into the toilets and it smells of strawberry or raspberry. So I don't know what the policy is currently about vaping on school premises.
Well, nobody quite... Well, I mean, obviously it's supposedly not allowed, but I know some schools have had to put extra strength smoke detectors in there because the vapes were setting them off. At the moment, it's very trendy to do it. It's peer pressure, Ken. I mean, people do it, and that's happened in school for years and years and years. We all remember, behind the bike shed smoking and what have you. But nobody quite knows whether it's just going to die a death or whether it's going to carry on.
Yeah, because even though on licensed premises, some places don't allow you to vape and some do, so I don't think there's a general, ruling on vaping.
Do you vape, Ken? Do you vape?
No, I hate it. It's bad enough trying to follow somebody down Strand Street with a vape, and you've got to cross over so you don't get the smell in your nostrils. Terrible stuff.
All right. Thanks for calling today, Ken.
Cheers, bye.
When the Mannin Line's not on air, call Manx Radio to leave your opinion for broadcast on 682 631.
TT 2024 is almost here, and once again Manx Radio will bring you every moment of the action with the best biking station in the world. How does this sound? Senior TT winner.
Sounds absolutely epic, doesn't it?
Practice and race commentary, interviews with all the top riders, along with the latest travel and weather updates. We'll also bring you pre-TT practice and race sessions at the Balan circuit.
You can listen online at motorsport.manxradio.com, our smartphone app on AM 1368 and on DAB in Douglas, Onken and the Central Valley.
The best biking station in the world.
It all starts tomorrow evening at 5 o'clock with our pre-TT coverage getting underway from 6.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Well, apparently, the UK called a general election yesterday, Thursday, 5th of July, the day before Tynwald Day. Fantastic. And British, you know what that means, don't you? That means for the next 6 weeks, there'll be nothing else on television. Television will be full of people you've never heard of talking about things that don't affect you. Anyway, what it does mean also, because there's a change in the law, British citizens on the Isle of Man are now eligible to register to vote in the UK general election. It's after a law came into effect earlier this year, removing a previous time limit. Did you know that? Until January of this year, people who left the UK more than 15 years ago lost their right to vote. The rule was abolished by the Election Act 2022, and now British citizens will be able to register in the last constituency they were signed up before leaving the UK. If you want more information, go to manxradio.com on our news site. There's a story all about it. You can find out more, and you can. It's all to do with a World War II veteran, Harry Schindler, who moved to Italy about 40 years ago. He got it all changed. Anyway, promise you we won't talk about the UK general election. But tomorrow we will talk about housing. You've heard much about it today. David Ashford, MHK, is on tomorrow. Got any thoughts about it? Do get in touch. Thanks to Chris Quirk on the phones today.
WINT